Okay, that'll do it for my intro. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another Playground Sessions live stream. Thanks for joining our YouTube channel. I'm Phil, and today I'm going to be talking about music theory. But you guys are going to help me figure out where we're going to take this lesson. So I need you to write some questions in the chat right now. This is going to be a live discussion on music theory, and I want to answer your questions and steer this lesson around your questions. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. But I'd like to ask you now to go ahead and write something if you haven't yet. All right? In the meantime, while you're writing your theory questions for me, I want to remind you guys what we have going on for the next few lessons. So next week, we're not going to be live on Wednesday like we usually are, but we will be live on that Friday. That's August 21st. And I'm going to bring back my trio again. So I'm going to have my bassist, Matthew DiRobertis, and I'm going to have my drummer, Holbrook Riles III. We're going to come and play a couple of songs for you guys and talk about playing piano in a group setting. So that's next week on the 21st. The following week, you guys, that final week in August, we're going to take a week off, okay? And I want everyone to go to the polls, the poll, I should say, that I just posted on the YouTube channel today. I gave you guys a hint at what the topics would be to vote on, right? And I know some of you voted last week. But the possible topics for September, I want you guys to vote on, and we'll start that after the following week in August. So in September, I'd like you guys to vote on the topics. And I think, you know, the three options I came up with were fun scales, right? Everyone kind of familiar with the major and minor type scales, but there's a lot of other cool ones out there. This is one of my favorites. This one's also pretty cool, kind of a dreamy whole tone scale. There's some really fun ones that suggest kind of different parts of the world, like different cultures will kind of have different types of scales, and so you can get into some fun Eastern and Indian type scales. And we could also talk about how to apply those scales in like real-world settings. The second option I want people to vote on would be to learn a classical piece together, one that is easier than average, right? Because a lot of times the classical music is the most demanding, especially for beginners or intermediate players. But a lot of times the most intimidating part of the classical piece is the notation itself before you've learned it. And if you can figure out what the patterns are, and you can figure out the notes and the hand positions and the fingering without just sight reading the music, then you'll find it'll be a lot easier than you expected. So I'm offering to walk you guys through a classical piece, TBD, and that's option 2. Option 3 is going to be Re-Harmonization. That's a fun concept for me. That's basically when you take an existing song, an existing melody with its existing chord progression, and you keep the melody intact, but you change the harmony underneath. You re-harmonize it. So everyone knows that harmony there is pretty basic. C major, G major, back to C. But if we were going to re-harmonize that, there's a ton of options we could do. I'll do one now. Doesn't have to always be so crunchy like that. I like jazz harmony, so let's try a different re-harmonization. Oops, I got jazzy again. But there's a lot of possibilities there with that. We can make it into something that sounds, you know, like a pop song, or something that sounds classical, or something that sounds like your own invention. We could talk about how to do that. How do you know what other chords you can use with a melody? And we can go pretty far into that topic as well. So I want everyone to vote in the official poll. If you go to the community tab of our YouTube channel here, you'll see that poll. And I'm going to keep this poll up for the next 2 weeks. All right, so I want to see a lot of votes coming through, and I'll announce that topic leading into September, okay? So that's what's going on. What I'd like to do now is get into the chat. I want to hear from you guys. and I want to start talking theory, okay? So I've got my computer over here, and I want to say what's up to everyone. So Sarah Pickles, Robert Atkins, you guys were first to the party tonight. Welcome. Jamie, how's it going? Hey, Lily Mae. Excuse me. Shannon Barkassi, how's it going? Hey, Streetlight the Poet 254, how's it going? Jet Key, all right, I'm seeing some new names in the chat. I love that. All right, well, let's get started on some theory. So I'm going to start with a Robert Atkins question. Thanks for writing in, Robert. Robert says, how many theory topics will be added to playground sessions? Just a general question to get the ball rolling. Okay, so first I would ask you, Robert, what level are you at in the boot camp? Because as you say, I might have more as the session goes. Oh, actually, I see. You're saying you may have more questions as the session goes. But yeah, I'm still curious, Robert. At what point are you in the boot camp? Because we have theory stuff sprinkled throughout, and if you're in the rookie tour, there's definitely some more stuff for you in intermediate and advanced. But if you've gone through the advanced tour and you've gone through the full boot camp, that'd be a different answer, right? So I can tell you this, where we usually put our theory stuff, we tend to put that stuff more into the boot camp or into a specific course to tackle a subject. There's always theory-related material in songs, but the song store, the song arrangements you find, we don't dig into the theory so much. It's just more, here's how you play measure by measure, right? So the theory stuff tends to come more in the boot camp lessons, which take more of a production. And so when we have been leaning on more song stuff over the past few months, such as the You Raise Me Up global piano recital, then the stuff like the boot camp can take a back seat, right? So until we grow as a content team, we have to pick and choose a little bit of what we prioritize. Now, since we did just do that big global recital, we are still going to keep doing song stuff, but now I think the internal team is looking at the rest of the year at when can we slot in some more boot camp shoots, okay? We have to get David out to the studio, right? And we need to really put a lot of work into those lessons. So I'll tell you that the next round of boot camp stuff is definitely going to come this year. But beyond that, I mean, those are the high production theory stuff that's going to live in the app forever. But beyond that, you know, there's all sorts of stuff we can get into here on YouTube. And over the last few years, there's also some stuff we've done on the YouTube channel that we haven't done in the app, such as the circle of fifths. That's a big theory kind of topic that is often intimidating to some, and that's something worth exploring. We don't currently have a circle of fifths lesson in the app, but we do have that on the YouTube channel. So I guess what I can say to kind of wrap this answer up, Robert, is I'd ask you to explore across all levels in the app and across all platforms, including YouTube. But then I would also like to say that, you know, we lean a lot on our song request form, and you guys may know that form by now. It's a place where you can request a song, and if someone else has already requested the song, you can upvote that request, and it gives a nice transparency to the demand for certain songs, right? We also have a tab for feature requests for the app. So I was talking to Andrew a little bit before the lesson started, and we were thinking it might be wise to add a theory request to that form as well, which would mean that you can jump in and ask for a specific theory topic that you'd like to be covered in a lesson. And so if enough people are interested in that, then we'll get that going, all right? So we definitely like to hear from you guys about what you want to learn. So Robert, I'll ask you a follow-up question. What's the next theory topic you'd like to learn in a playground lesson? All right, thanks, Robert. So let's keep it moving. And by the way, I mentioned the circle of fifths. If I get to a point where I'm not seeing any new questions, maybe I'll start talking about the circle of fifths a little bit. Okay, that's a big one. All right, Lily Mae. Hey, Lily Mae. Lily Mae asks, what is a good way to count dotted half notes? I'm trying to start practicing my songs with correct rhythms. I know how to count quarter notes and half notes, but have trouble with the dotted half notes. Okay, this is a great question. So Lily Mae, the first thing I would say is it might depend on the time signature. In terms of how you subdivide beats and what syllables you assign to those, the time signature can affect that. But let's just assume that we're in 4/4, okay? So you mentioned you know how to count quarter notes and half notes correctly. So in 4/4, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. That's quarter notes. Or half notes would be 1, 2, 3, 4. The speed of my counts does not change, but how long I hold those notes against my counts will change, right, depending on the note value. So quarter notes will play every count. 1, 2, 3, 4. But half notes will count 2 for every note. 1, 2, 3, 4. So Lily May, in that context of 4/4, a dotted half note, you'd simply count to 3. 1, 2, 3. And then whatever happens on beat 4, we don't know, right? Now, if you're in 3/4 time, you would just count to 3, and that's your whole measure. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's how you would count the dotted half notes in that context. Now, if you are in a time signature that, for example, 4/2, right? You don't see that one too often out in the real world, but we like to lean on 4/2 time signature in the app for rookie level lessons because it makes the reading and the scroll bar, it makes the notation seem a little bit less intimidating. And there's a handful of other reasons as well. But when we're in 4/2, you have to remember what the time signature means. So let's do a little time signature lesson here for those who may need a brush up on that. So the time signature are the two numbers you see at the beginning of your staff in music, top and bottom. Now the most common one, it's actually called common time for a reason, is 4/4. 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom. The top number and the bottom number each tell you something about the song. The top number tells you how many beats or counts will fit into each measure. Now a measure across the staff is when you see the vertical lines come down and separate the staff into boxes, right? Those are measures. And the time signature, that top number tells you how many counts fit into each measure, right? So in 4/4, top number's 4, we're going to be able to count 4 beats in every measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like that. And if we, let's see. If we are in, I lost my train of thought there. So if we're in 4/4, yeah, 4/4 top, okay, the top number is 4 counts in every measure, 1, 2, 3, 4. The bottom number tells you what note value gets 1 count. And that's where things get a little trickier. The bottom number, I guess you could say typically, maybe not typically, but often enough, it's 4. On the bottom, if you see a 4, that tells you that a quarter note gets 1 beat. Now, many of you may know that as a fact. Quarter note always gets 1 beat. But that's not necessarily the case if we start getting into some other time signatures, like 4/2, for example. So the 4 on the bottom tells you quarter note gets 1 beat. But what happens if we see a time signature of 4/2, where we have a 2 on the bottom? Okay, still 4 beats per measure. That's what the top number tells us. But the bottom number tells us, if it's a 2, that a half note gets 1 beat. So 4/2 tells us that there are 4 counts in a measure, but a half note gets 1 count in that time signature. Another way to say that would be that you can fit 4 half notes into 1 measure. Now in 4/4, in common time, we can only fit 2 half notes in a measure. But 4/2, that changes things. So Lily May, I hope you see that the time signature will actually change how you would count some of these note values. And if we're in 4/2, we're counting half notes as 1 count, then a dotted half note actually gets 1.5 counts, right? Kind of like a dotted quarter note in 4/4 time. So I hope that didn't make it more complicated for you, but I would say that the short answer is if your time signature is 4/4, a dotted half note gets, boom, 3 counts. So if it's on the beginning of the measure, you'd say 1, 2, 3, 4. If it's at the end of the measure, you would do something like 1, 2, 3, 4. Even though I'm saying 2, 3, 4, I'm still just counting 3 counts, right? Okay, thanks for the question, Lily Mae. If that did not answer it for you, please follow up with me. All right, let's keep this moving. Charles Smith, thanks for the question. Charles Smith says, using the circle of fifths as a reference point, is there a shortcut for determining the tritone substitution? I think I have worked it out in my head. Not sure though. Cool. I love when I get questions like this. Tritone substitutions. All right. So this one's going to be potentially over the heads of some of the beginners out there, so I won't spend too much time on this. But what Charles Smith is talking about actually plays in a little bit to the concept of reharmonization. He's talking about substituting a chord with a different chord, specifically the chord that is built from the note that is a tritone away from that chord. And a tritone is an interval of, I don't know, it's a diminished fifth, but it's how many half steps? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 half steps away. And 3 whole steps, yeah. So it's essentially the most dissonant and tense interval in Western music, or at least it's widely recognized as such. And in fact, it's meant to make you feel uncomfortable. There's a tension in a tritone interval that wants to be released. And, you know, sirens, ambulances, police cars, they're meant to grab your attention quickly, right? So you know what's coming. And those sirens typically use tritone intervals in their sirens. So that's what a tritone is. And Charles is asking about a substitute chord, a tritone sub for a chord. Okay, so if I'm playing a blues, briefly there I did a little tritone sub. Instead of playing a C major chord, I briefly played a chord from F sharp major, which is a tritone away, and then that led me down to my F chord, which was where I was landing. So that's kind of a quick way that you could use a tritone sub. Now your question, Charles, is about, is there a shortcut when using the circle of fifths as a reference point? So the circle of fifths is a really, really cool, you call it a diagram, a symbol. It's kind of like a symbol that has a million pieces of information in it. Circle of fifths is a chart, essentially, that you can use to have all of your keys around, so key of C, key of G, key of D, key of A. All of your keys that you could be in across music are all represented in the circle of fifths in a way that once you understand it, it can become like a cheat sheet or a reference for you to not only figure out what the key signature is for any key, but how many sharps or flats are in that key and what are the keys that are sharped or flatted. And there's all sorts of more advanced stuff than that too in the circle of fifths. So I'll answer your question, Charles, by saying this. Trying to use the circle of fifths to identify a tritone might be overkill. You might be looking at something with a ton of information when all you really need is to think about the distance from the root a tritone away. So, for example, if you were looking for the tritone sub for G major, really what you need to do is figure out what note is a tritone away from G. Now, you could use the circle of fifths in a sense to figure out what is a fifth up from G and then go down a half step. So on the circle of fifths, when you see G major, the next one down is D major, because that's the next one in the circle. So G to D is a fifth, and if you flatted that or brought it down a half step, you'd have D flat or C sharp. That's a tritone. So that would be the way I would say you might be able to lean on the circle of fifths to figure that out. But I think you might be better off just straight up looking down and saying, what's a fifth away from where I am right now? Moving up, and then flat it by a half, just bring it down a half step. There's a tritone interval. So now you know your note, and you can build that chord from that note. Okay? Good question. Tritone subs is a fun lesson. All right. Is there a Phil in the mix? Oh, Phil Williams. Hey, love the name, my friend. Phil says, can you explain the tonic and dominant relationship? I sure can, and this is actually a perfect follow-up to what we were just talking about tritone tension and wanting to resolve. Okay, so let's talk about that a bit more. One of the things that defines a dominant seventh chord sound is the tritone interval that is housed within. And I'll show you exactly what I mean here. We're going to talk about, let's talk about a G7 chord, a G dominant 7 chord. So we have a G with its seventh would be here, but a flat 7 makes it dominant. So G major triad with a flat 7. And for those who may not be able to see my keyboard at this angle, I'm playing G, B, D, and F. Now let's break this down for a second. What are the roles of each of these notes? Okay, the G is the root, the B is the third, the D is the fifth, and the flat 7 is, the F is the flat 7. But if we eliminate the root and we eliminate the fifth, what we're left with is the third and seventh. And if you're a jazz person or a blues person, or have heard me talk about that stuff, you've probably heard me say third and seventh like a million times, because it's an important, those are the important defining tones within this chord, and within most actually in jazz. So the essence of a dominant seventh chord is the interval of a tritone between the major third and the flat 7. There's that siren, right? The tritone between B and F. That is a tritone. So the dominant seventh chord, the dominant, actually let me back up, Phil. The tonic and dominant, quickly, I'll back up and explain. The tonic and the dominant are two parts to any given key. Let's say we're in the key of G or the key of B flat. Doesn't matter. There's always a tonic, there's always a dominant, and more. But the tonic and the dominant are the most important, you could say, to identifying the key. What key are we in? If you have a tonic and a dominant, that's all you need to know. But if you have a random minor chord off to the side, it might be hard to know what key we're in. But if we have a tonic and dominant, those will define it for us. The dominant is the chord that is built from the fifth scale degree. So right now I'm in the key of C, okay? C. The dominant chord in the key of C is the one that is built from the fifth scale degree, C, D, E, F, G. So it's a chord built from G. And if we make it a 4-note chord, we see that it's a flat 7 on top. Therein lies that tritone interval. The dominant is the chord built from the fifth scale degree. And remember that, everyone. There might be a pop quiz in your future on that. Okay, the tonic is the chord that's built from the 1. The tonic is 1. If we're in the key of C, the tonic is C. So when you're thinking about dominant to tonic, I want you to think about 5 to 1. The chord that's built from the fifth scale degree to the chord that's built from the 1 scale degree. All right, so let's get back to now our G7 chord. That's the 5 chord in the key of C. G dominant 7. So the dominant chord has that built-in tritone. Another way to say that is built-in tension. And it wants to resolve, right? So check this out. How could this possibly resolve in a way that sounds good? Check this out. When the tritone compresses inward by half steps, you go, and by inward I mean into itself. So the bottom is going to come up and the top's going to come down by half steps. And look at where that resolves, to C and E. Now that's the root and the major third of the tonic. That's the C chord, right? So you go from G7 to C major, and that's 5 to 1 in the key of C. Now, Phil, your question is, can you explain the relationship? Yeah, so I think that's the relationship. 5 gives the listener, the dominant gives the listener a sense of motion, like and the need to resolve, and the tonic provides that resolution. Okay, and yeah, another way to say that would be a release, tension and release, right? Resolving to the major chord, the 1 chord, the tonic, provides a nice release to the tension that was given by the dominant chord. All right, I hope that answers your question, Phil. Let's keep it moving. I got a question from Patrick here. Patrick, what up? Talk to me. Patrick says, is there a basic way to understand voicing? Okay, so when we're talking about voicings here, Okay, so voicing, when someone says chord voicing, here's what they're referring to. A C major chord, for example, we all know C, E, G. But there's a lot of different ways that we can voice that chord. And I'll show you. Here's one. Here's one. Here's another one. Here's one. And here's one. What's the difference? I was only using those three notes, C, E, and G. Now, sometimes I was doubling them. Sometimes I was omitting one. But really I was changing range and changing whether I was doing a closed kind of position or a wider open one. So that's kind of what's meant by chord voicings. And Patrick is asking, is there a basic way to do that or understand that? Yeah. If I've interpreted your question right, Patrick, then I would say that I like to think about voicings for chords as if every note I'm playing is a person singing in a choir. And not just because it's the word voice in voicings, although I'm sure there's a reason that is, there's a relationship there. But really for me, it's about, if we have a C major chord and I sing this note, but it's too high for Andrew, so he's going to sing it down here. It's still a C, but now we have two voicings. We have two voices in that chord, a high C and a low C. And then Aiden might sing, and then if we had a young female singer with a high range, they might sing up there, or actually an octave higher. So what that's going to do is spread out our voicing for the chord, but it's still just a C major harmony. And so I look at this as a 5-voice chord because it's a C major harmony, but I've specifically got 5 notes. Some are doubled, some are just single, but this is the voicing in this particular moment. So that's one way to think about it. And let's see here. Okay. All right, yeah, so Patrick, if I have misinterpreted your question about voicing, let me know and I'd be happy to re-answer. But let's move on for now. So I'm going to field a question from Elta John. Hey, Elta. And for those of you who are watching new, it's not Elton John. He was in the last lesson, but you missed him. So Elta John is in the mix. Elta asks, I get how inversions are noted F over A or F over C, but what does F over G mean? This is an awesome question. Okay, so Elta, there's really 2 different kinds of chord symbols that you might see that have a slash through it like that. They look the same, F over A and F over G. They kind of function the same way. You see a letter and a slash and a letter, but they actually mean different things. So one of those is to represent a chord inversion. F over A, F over C. Those are both 4 chord inversions. And what I mean is, you could read that like this. The first letter is the name of the chord. So F over A is an F chord, but the over A means that you have the A note, which is in the chord. The A is actually on the bottom. So here's a normal F chord, but if we invert it so that you have, instead of F, A, C, now you have A, C, F, the bottom note or voice of this chord is A. So this right here is F over A, an F major chord with an A on the bottom. Now, Elta, I know you're saying you already know that, but I'm explaining this for those who may not. F over C, same idea, an F chord with a C in the bottom. So that's another inversion of an F chord. F major, F over A, F over C, and then you're back to F over F, which is just F, right? So that's what that means. And if you see a chord symbol that has a slash through it like that, you need to do a little bit of analysis first. You have to ask yourself, is the letter that comes after the slash one of the chord tones in the first letter's chord? So F over A. Well, what is an F chord? F, A, C. Okay, so yes, A is in that, right? So then you know it's an inversion. It's an F harmony, but I'm going to play it with an A in the bottom of the voice, okay? Now, what happens if you see something like F over G? Okay, F, A, C, that's my F chord. Wait a minute, there's no G in this chord. So what does that mean, right? This is the second type of slash chord symbol we'll see. And F over G means something different. Because there is no G in the F chord, it's not just going to be a matter of inversion, right, to get it right. We have to actually think about this now as two separate things. An F chord and, separately, a G in the bass. Okay? And that would look like this. And by the way, you could also invert that F chord on top. Doesn't matter. F over G just means F harmony with a G in the bass. And that actually changes the function of the chord. It's no longer an F chord. When you see F triad over G, that is kind of a shorthand way of describing a more complex harmony. F over G really is like a G sus 13. Now it sounds like a kind of a crazy chord, right? Well, yeah, that's why people just say F over G a lot of times, because that kind of includes all that information. A G7 sus, I guess it's 9, but either way, it's just like a G sus with some added notes. But if you just say F triad over a G in the bass, it's a shorthand way of describing that harmony. And so when you see F over G, you need to think about that chord as functionally as a G dominant chord. It's like a G dominant sus chord that wants to resolve, right, and release that tension. F over G is really like a G sus chord that wants to resolve to the tonic, like that. So, great question, Elta. And sometimes you'll even see even weirder ones like, you know, C over D flat. You know, stuff that's meant to be a crunchy, clashy chord. I don't even know where that wants to resolve to. Not that. But you'll see some weird ones sometimes too. So your first step is to figure out, is that bottom note part of the chord? And if it is, we're just talking about a chord inversion. If it's not, then we're talking about a kind of a double harmony, a superimposed triad on top of a root to create a different harmony. Okay? Great question. I love it. I love it. You guys are really giving me some good ones. Okay. Okay, so Phil, I got another one from Phil here. Phil says, I keep coming across different interval terms, such as augmented, diminished, harmonic. Could you help explain them? Yes, I can. Okay, so sometimes you'll hear people refer to intervals. I even did earlier. I think I said a diminished fifth. Okay, so there's two parts of that. There's just diminished, which means something on its own, and then what it means is applied to the interval of a fifth. So diminished really means, I believe the technical definition of it is just flat, right? It's you flatting it. Is that right, Andrew? Diminished? Yeah. So to diminish a note would be to flat it. To augment a note would be to sharp it, okay? So think about it like that first. And if you have an interval of a fifth, for example, C and G, if it's a diminished fifth, then you're flatting the fifth, which is also a tritone, right? That's what we talked about earlier. So you diminish a fifth interval, it becomes a tritone. An augmented fifth would be this. It would be C to G, but you're sharping the G. Now, if you look at an augmented chord or a diminished chord, that also means something else too. So we know augmented means sharp. If you see a C augmented chord, not just the interval, but a full triad, so C, E, G, but you see it's C augmented, what that means is you're playing C, E sharp fifth. So this is your sound here for an augmented chord. And the intervals for that chord are major third and major third. C to E is a major third, E to G sharp is a major third. G sharp to C again is another major third, and you can see how it's all major thirds. Yep. And you have, so augmented in that setting still implies sharp fifth. A diminished chord, let's take C minor for example, or C for example. We already said a diminished fifth would be flatting that G, so C to G flat. But a diminished triad is a minor triad with a flat fifth. And that results in a chord that has all minor third intervals. That's minor third, minor third, minor third, minor third. Suspense. That's the diminished chord. What else did you ask, Phil? Harmonic. Okay, so harmonic is in a little bit of a different category. Harmonic will be referred to when you think about when you refer to a certain type of minor scale. I think that's the most common use of that term. So harmonic minor versus melodic minor, for example, or something else. And so I can briefly talk about that. Harmonic minor is a specific formula for a minor scale that has a natural seventh. So the defining part of a harmonic minor scale would be flat 6, but natural 7. Okay? Melodic minor has a natural 6 and a natural 7. And when you descend through it, it's got a flat 7 and a flat 6. So the 6 and 7 are either both natural or both flat, typically in our common minor scales. But a harmonic minor scale is a really cool one because it has that flat 6 but a natural 7. So of course you have 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, natural 7. So that provides a really cool that's like the Middle Eastern kind of scale that is used so often in to portray music from that culture. Harmonic minor is all over that, and that's the sound. Okay, so you're coming down from the root, you have a half step, and then you jump a minor third, and then from there you go down another half step. Let's see if I can do this. Harmonic minor, okay? My daughter just turned 3. Her favorite movie right now is Aladdin, the 90s version, what I grew up with. And so I've been doing a lot of Aladdin jamming with Gemma at home. She likes, what is it? So we've been doing that. It's all harmonic minor. Cool. There's some fun scales out there, I'm telling you guys. All right, so Robert asks, what would be the chord construction of seventh chords? Maybe use C major to explain it and go through all the diatonic chords within that. Sure, I can do that. So Robert's asking about how we build chords in a key, let's say C, the key of C major. How do we know what all the chords are that go into the key of C major? Diatonic means of the scale. So, C chord, we're not going to play a C sharp chord because that C sharp is not in the scale, not in the C major scale. So diatonically speaking, just the chords that are in the scale, Robert's asking, how do we construct seventh chords? And I'll tell you, it's just as easy as constructing the triads. It may be a little harder to play because it's 4 notes instead of 3, but all you're doing is stacking notes up in thirds in the scale. And so in C major, it's just as easy as continuing that pattern of skipping a note every other note. And I'll show you what I mean here. So quickly, I'll go through with triads to show all of the diatonic chords in the key of C. So C major, and it's just all white keys, skipping one every time, right? Next, we have D minor. And I'm using the scale, by the way, to figure out what notes are in these chords. How do I know it's not this with an F sharp? Because F sharp is not in the key. The scale in C major is all white keys. So we have to build from white keys, and we have to use white keys to construct these chords, at least in the key of C major. So C major, D minor, same shape, just starting from D. E minor, same shape, starting from E. That's why C major is a great reference point. F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, C major. Same shape, moving up through the white keys. So as we add a 4th note to these chords, therefore creating 7th chords, like Robert is asking about, we just simply apply that same thing again on top of our triad. So we have our scale, here's the 1, skip 1, okay, there's that, skip 1, there's our triad, let's keep going, skip this, and there's that. There we have it, C major 7. So if we're talking about 4-note chords, or seventh chords in the key moving up diatonically. This is true of any key. The 1 chord is a major 7 chord. It's a major triad with a natural 7th, a major 7. And notice, Robert, it's the same pattern. I'm just skipping a white note as I go. So let's do the same thing from the 2 chord. There it is, D, F, A, C. What is that? Well, it's a minor triad with a flat 7. That's a minor 7. The 2 chord is always a minor 7 chord. 1 is major 7. 2 is minor 7. 3 is also minor 7. E, G, B, D. 4 is going to be major 7. F, A, C, E. 5 is, and this is a callback to a question earlier, this is unique. The 5 chord, when you add that 4th note on top, when you add that 7th on top, it's a unique one because it's not a major 7 or a minor 7. It's a dominant 7. A major 7 has a major 3rd and a major 7. A minor 7 chord has a minor 3rd and a minor 7. But a dominant 7 chord has a major 3rd and a minor 7. And it's that major 3rd and minor 7 interval, that tritone interval, that makes it what it is. So the dominant 7th chord is an important one. And there we have it, G, B, D, F. Let's keep moving. The 6th chord, A minor 7. So once again, we have a minor 3rd and a minor 7. I should say a flat 3rd and a flat 7. That tells us it's a minor 7th chord. 6th chord is always a minor 7. The 7 chord, we call this chord a diminished chord when we do it as a triad, right? Because it's a 3-note chord and it's a minor 3rd and a diminished 5th, right? But when we add the 4th note to this chord, we have to pull from the scale that we're in, okay? So we'll skip this note, we'll go here. Now, we are no longer playing a fully diminished chord because we have a different interval than just a minor 3rd. We have minor 3rd, and then a major 3rd. That's a different chord. This chord is typically referred to as a half diminished chord. You have a diminished 5th, but you still have a normal flat 7 instead of like a, I don't know, would it be a double flat or something like that? So, yeah, or if you were playing like a B fully diminished 7th, how would you spell that? It'd be a B double flat, right? A double flat. Or an A, excuse me, A double flat. So but exactly, not in practical terms. By the way, Andrew is like my theory guide that I bounce stuff off of because he and I went through the same program in college, so that's always fun. But you know, the 7th chord's always the outlier, whether it's a triad or a 4-note chord. But here we'll call that a half diminished. And then you're back to C major and C major 7. That's the 1 chord. So let me briefly recap. Here's all the 4-note chords. I'm playing them in the key of C, but I'm just going to refer to them by their quality because that's true of any key. So the 1 is a major 7. 2 is minor 7. 3 is minor 7. 4 is major 7. 5 is dominant 7. 6 is minor 7. 7th is a half diminished. And we're back to 1, major 7. Great question. I hope that helped. Elta John asks, I know you've covered before, but can you review the key elements to tell if it's a major or minor key signature? Okay, sweet, yeah. I will answer that. I'm trying to decide if I want to give you guys a pop quiz first, but no, I'll do that after this. So, all right, so Elta is talking about key signatures. Now, some of you may know that every major key has a relative minor key, and they share a key signature. So the key signature of G major, for example, is 1 sharp, F sharp. But there is a minor key that also has that same key signature, E minor. 1 sharp, F sharp, same thing. So you could look at a key signature and say, 1 sharp. That's either the key of G major or E minor, right? And so Elta is asking, how do you know what it is? If they have the exact same key signature, how do you know? It's a great question, and unfortunately, Elta, what I'm going to tell you may not be what you're hoping for, but you've got to do some analysis. You've got to look at your music, and you have to look for certain cues that will hint about what key we're in, if we're in G major or E minor, for example, okay? Now, the E minor chord on its own exists in the key of G major, right? It's the 6th chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you see an E minor chord, that's not necessarily enough to know that you're in the key of E minor, because you can also see that in the key of G major. So what are you looking for to be able to tell? Well, this all comes back to dominant and tonic, tension and release, okay? And I'm going to explain. So in the key of G major versus E minor, okay? Let's say we're in the key of G major. You'd expect to see quite a bit of tonic and dominant, right? Okay, so what's the tonic in the key of G? G. What's the dominant? D. D dominant resolves to G. D dominant 7 has that tritone that resolves inward to G major. That's 5-1, dominant to tonic in the key of G, okay? If we see a bunch of D major to G, D major to G, D dominant to G, right out of the gate, I'm thinking, I think we're in the key of G major, okay? What would I have to see for me to think, oh wait, maybe we're in the key of E minor? Well, let's take a look, okay? Let's look at 5-1 in the key of E minor. So E minor is 1 in the key of E minor. What would 5 be? A note built from B, okay? But it's not going to be a B minor chord. If we're talking dominant to tonic, remember, a dominant chord is a major triad with a flat 7. So what is a major triad with a flat 7 from the 5th scale degree of E? That's the question, okay? So B major with a flat 7. There's my B dominant 7th chord. Now I want you to notice something. I've got 2 black keys here in my voicing. One of those is in the key signature, F sharp. So we would expect to see that. But D sharp is not in the key signature for G major. Nor would you see it in the key signature for E minor, but you may very well see it often in the notation, in the measures. If you're seeing D sharp, D sharp, D sharp, that would be functionally acting as the leading tone to resolve you back to E. So in other words, a B dominant 7th chord is the 5 of E minor. And a B dominant 7th chord is not found in the key of G major, but it is going to be found in the key of E minor. So that's what you're going to be looking for, Elta. In that hypothetical, okay, oh, got a piece of music here, the key signature of 1 sharp. It's either G major or E minor. Let me look around and see if I can spot any 5s of E, a 5 chord of E minor. And it's gonna stick out to you because you're gonna see a sharp next to the D in that chord. A B major chord or B dominant 7th chord is meant to tonicize E minor by acting as its 5 chord, its dominant. So that's gonna be my kind of shorthand way of figuring that out. You're also probably gonna see a lot of beginning of the phrases and ending of the phrases centering around E versus G, if it's minor. So I hope that helps. That's one way to do it. Okay. All right. I'm going to get one more question in, you guys, but first I'm going to ask a pop quiz question, all right? Pop quiz. And for those who don't know and who've never been in one of these streams before, I like to ask you guys questions about topics we've covered in these lessons, and whoever gets the answers right in the chat, we will award that winner with a free song credit for the interactive app, the Playground Sessions app. So many of you have known about this for a while now, but in case there are some new names, I'm going to ask you to write your answer in the chat. And I'm going to pick the first 2 acceptable answers here, okay? I'm going to ask you to teach me something I just taught you guys. I'm actually going to... All right, the pop quiz question for today is actually going to be a question that I received and I already answered. And let's see if someone can give me the right answer. All right, the question is, can you explain the relationship between tonic and dominant? Now, there's a handful of answers that could be right here. This isn't just like a one right answer and everything else is wrong. We've been talking about it throughout the lesson. I will accept a myriad of answers here, okay? Someone explain to me some aspect of the relationship between tonic and dominant. Help me out here. And the first two people who give me acceptable answers are going to be our winners for tonight, okay? So while I'm answering this next and last question that is from Phil, I would like you all to write your answers to this pop quiz question in the chat. All right. So the final question is from Phil. Phil asks, what is a cadence? Great question. A cadence is one of those musical terms. Well, it exists outside of music too, but in a musical setting, a cadence essentially is kind of like wrapping up a phrase. How are we ending the phrase? Many of you have probably heard something like this before. It's like an extended ending. Or you might hear something like this. Or you might hear. It depends on how long you want to delay the resolution. Those are all examples of cadences, okay? And there are some that are very common and straight up have names, and they've been used for hundreds of years. And maybe that's what you're asking about here. So I can tell you that the common ones are, you have authentic cadence, you have a plagal cadence. That's like the hallelujah cadence, I believe. That's the 4-1, yeah. The amen, excuse me. At the end of a hymn, for example. Plagal cadence, 4-1. Okay, so we're eventually resolving to 1, or the tonic, the 1 chord. So when we say 4-1, we're describing a progression, the 4 chord to the 1 chord. So I'm in the key of C for a minute. I'm just going to play a little bit. That's as simple as that. So a cadence, a plagal cadence, is a super, fancy way to basically say the 4 chord to the 1 chord. Okay. Now, authentic cadence, that might be your most common in a certain era of classical music and things like that. That's when you have 5-1. Authentic cadence. A deceptive cadence. Wait, I thought a deceptive cadence was when you went 5 up to 6. Okay, you wrote 6-1, but so deceptive cadence is cool too, because as we know, we have the major chord and the relative minor. So major in the key of C, the 1 is C, but its relative minor is A minor, also known as the 6. And so a deceptive cadence is when you set up the 5 chord, the dominant, like you're going to resolve to the 1 chord, but instead you resolve up to the 6. And often people will also do this kind of walking passing tone to get you up there. But that becomes less deceptive. That's more like you're setting it up. Deceptive kind of hints at the fact that your ears are being set up to expect the dominant to resolve to the tonic, but it deceives your ear because it resolves to the 6 chord instead. And I think there are, Andrew says the modern cadence is when you just do anything to anything. So we'll end it, that's my kind of cadence. So I'll say 5 to flat 2 to flat 6. Oh wait, flat 5 to flat 7, major 7, resolving up to C major. There's my modern cadence for Andrew. So think about a cadence in general as being the way that you resolve a phrase, the progression you use to resolve a phrase. There are those common ones that I went over, but any way that you end your phrase, I guess that's your cadence. And you can think about it like that. All right, guys, well, this has been fun. All great questions. So thank you all for participating. I hope you all got something out of this. We covered stuff from beginner level up to advanced, like how to do a tritone substitution and all sorts of other stuff. So this has been great. Now let's get to our pop quiz here. The question was a question that I received earlier in the lesson. What's the relationship between tonic and dominant? And I asked you guys to weigh in on that to see if you were following. So I got some answers here. Robert Atkins says 1 is the tonic. Tonic is the 1 and dominant is the 5th. Lily May is saying 1, the dominant resolves the tonic. Elta John says the tonic built on the 1st scale, dominant is built on the 5th degree. Shannon Barkassi says tonic is the ambulance sound. 031770 sounds like a bot to me, but they have a real answer. Resolution 5-7-1, great, that'll count it. John Anderson is, oh, that's a cadence question. Okay, cool. So you guys, everybody is right here, but I'll say, Shannon, I think what you meant to say is that the tritone interval is the siren. The tonic can be a note in a tritone interval, but the tonic itself is the 1 scale degree, or the 1 chord. The harmony that's built from the 1 scale degree. So great work, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and give it to the top 3. Okay, so that means Robert Atkins, Lily May, and Elta John. You guys all get a free song credit for your correct answer. So just email Andrew at support@playgroundsessions.com, and he'll hook you up with a free song credit. All right. Well, just as a quick reminder, you guys, next week Wednesday we're off, but Friday, August 21st. I'm going to be doing a trio performance with my bassist and drummer. The following week, we are off for the week. But during the next 2 weeks, the rest of August, I'm going to ask you to go and vote on the September topics. Fun scales, easy classical piece, or re-harmonization. I'll see you guys next week on Friday with my band.